What would you do if you discovered that the woman your father married was hiding secrets that could destroy everything you believed about your family? When successful businessman William Hartford accidentally stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his stepmother Elena's car, he never imagined that a single discovery would force his father, the respected Judge Charles Hartford, to call security and change their lives forever. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Sometimes a simple glove compartment holds the key to unraveling decades of carefully constructed lies. And, sometimes, the truth is more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of how one family's perfect facade crumbled in a single afternoon, and how a discovery in a luxury car's glove compartment set off a chain of events that would test the bonds of family, loyalty, and survival. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Hartford estate as William Hartford pulled into the circular driveway. His father's mansion stood majestically against the backdrop of rolling hills, its stone facade gleaming in the golden light. William had made this drive countless times over the past 3 years, ever since his father Charles had married Elena Vasquez, but today felt different. Today, he carried news that would change everything. William stepped out of his silver BMW and straightened his tie. At 32, he had inherited his father's commanding presence and sharp intellect, traits that had served him well in building his own successful consulting firm. But, beneath his confident exterior, anxiety gnawed at him. The phone call he had received that morning from his private investigator still echoed in his mind. The front door opened before he could knock, and Elena appeared in the doorway. At 45, she was still strikingly beautiful, with dark hair that caught the light and warm brown eyes that had initially charmed the entire Hartford family. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse and perfectly tailored pants, every inch the picture of elegant sophistication. "William, darling," Elena said, her slight accent adding a musical quality to her voice. "Your father is in his study. He's been looking forward to your visit all week." "Thank you, Elena," William replied, forcing a smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Never," she laughed, the sound light and genuine. "You know you're always welcome here. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? That herbal tea you like?" "Coffee would be perfect, thank you." As Elena glided toward the kitchen, William watched her carefully. For 3 years, he had tried to accept her as part of the family. His father had been alone for nearly 8 years after William's mother passed away from cancer, and Elena had brought joy back into Charles Hartford's life. She was attentive, caring, and seemed genuinely devoted to the distinguished judge who had captured her heart. But, the phone call this morning had shattered William's carefully maintained peace with the situation. William found his father in the oak-paneled study, surrounded by law books and judicial papers. Judge Charles Hartford, at 68, remained an imposing figure. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made him one of the most respected judges in the state. He looked up from his papers with a warm smile that reminded William of countless childhood moments. "Son, there you are," Charles said, rising from his leather chair. "I was just reviewing some cases for next week. How's business?" "Growing faster than I can keep up with," William replied, accepting his father's firm handshake. "The Morrison account alone is going to require 3 new hires." "Excellent. Your mother would be so proud of what you've built." The mention of his mother caused a familiar pang in William's chest. Margaret Hartford had been the heart of their family, a brilliant attorney in her own right who had balanced a successful career with being a devoted wife and mother. Her loss had devastated both William and his father, leaving a void that had taken years to even partially heal. Elena entered with a silver tray bearing 3 cups of coffee and delicate pastries from the French bakery downtown. She moved with practiced grace, setting everything on the coffee table near the fireplace. "I thought we could all catch up properly," Elena said, settling into her chair with elegant poise. "Charles was just telling me about the scholarship fund he's establishing at the university." "It's something your mother and I always talked about," Charles explained to William. "Supporting young people who want to study law but can't afford the education." "Elena has been incredibly helpful with the planning." William watched Elena's face carefully as his father spoke. She appeared genuinely interested and supportive, asking thoughtful questions about the scholarship criteria and application process. If he didn't know what he now knew, he would never suspect anything was amiss. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering topics from family friends to current legal cases. Elena contributed thoughtfully, demonstrating her intelligence and genuine care for Charles's work and interests. She had always been good at this, William realized. She had always been the perfect stepmother, the ideal wife for his grieving father. Which made what he had learned that morning all the more shocking. "I should probably head out soon," William said finally, checking his watch. "I have a client dinner at 7. "Of course," Charles said. "But, don't be a stranger." Elena was just saying how much she misses having family dinners like we used to have when you lived here. "Those were wonderful times," Elena agreed. "Perhaps we could plan something for next weekend?" "That sounds nice," William replied, though his mind was elsewhere. As they walked toward the front door, Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. "I need to take this," she said apologetically. "It's my sister calling from Spain. She only calls when there's family drama." She stepped into the living room for privacy, leaving William and his father alone in the foyer. "She's been worried about her nephew," Charles explained quietly. "Apparently, he's been getting into trouble at university. Elena sends money to help the family, you know. She's incredibly generous." William nodded, but his investigator's words echoed in his mind. "The woman has no sister in Spain, Mr. Hartford. In fact, most of her family background appears to be fabricated." "Dad," William began carefully, "how much do you actually know about Elena's past?" Charles looked surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I know everything important. She grew up in Barcelona, moved to the United States for university, worked in international business before we met." "Why do you ask?" Before William could respond, Elena's voice rose slightly from the living room. She was speaking in rapid Spanish, her tone urgent and somewhat distressed. William, who had studied Spanish in college, caught fragments of the conversation. "No puedes hacer esto ahora. You can't do this now, demasiado arriesgado. Too risky, necesito más tiempo. I need more time." The conversation didn't sound like family drama. It sounded like business. Dangerous business. Elena returned to the foyer, her expression slightly strained but quickly smoothing back into her usual composed demeanor. "Family troubles?" Charles asked with concern. "Nothing I can't handle," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "My nephew is just being rebellious. You know how young men can be." She looked directly at William as she said this, and, for just a moment, he thought he saw something calculating in her eyes. "Well, I should really be going," William said. "Thank you for the coffee, Elena." "Dad, I'll call you tomorrow." As William walked toward his car, he heard Elena call after him. "William, wait. I think I left my lights on in my car. Could you check for me? It's the white Mercedes in the garage." William paused. Elena's request seemed innocent enough, but something about her tone made him wary. Still, he nodded and walked toward the three-car garage. Elena's Mercedes was indeed sitting in the garage, a gleaming white luxury sedan that Charles had bought for her last Christmas. William approached the driver's side and peered through the window. The lights were off. As he turned to leave, he noticed that the car door was slightly ajar. Concerned that it might not be properly locked, he opened the door to close it securely. As he did, the glove compartment popped open, apparently having been left unlatched. Papers spilled out onto the floor. William knelt to gather them up, intending simply to return them to the glove compartment. But, as he collected the documents, his eyes caught sight of names, dates, and official letterheads that made his blood run cold. The first document was a passport. But, it wasn't Elena's passport with her married name of Hartford, or even her maiden name of Vasquez. The passport bore her photograph, but the name read Maria Santos and showed an address in Miami, Florida. The second document was even more disturbing. It was a bank statement from an account in the Cayman Islands, showing deposits and withdrawals in amounts that made William's head spin. Millions of dollars had flowed through this account over the past 2 years. But it was the third document that made William's hands shake. It was a letter from a law firm in Colombia, written in Spanish. William's college Spanish was rusty, but he could understand enough to know that this was correspondence about money laundering charges and extradition proceedings. Elena Vesquez Hartford, the woman his father had married, the woman who had brought love and companionship back into Charles Hartford's life, was not who she claimed to be. William's mind raced as he stared at the documents. Everything began to make a horrible kind of sense. Elena's expensive tastes that seemed to exceed what she could afford on her stated income. Her vague explanations about her past. The phone calls she sometimes took in private. The way she had insisted on keeping her own banking and financial affairs separate from Charles's. She had been using his father. Worse, she had been using him as cover. A respected federal judge made the perfect front for someone who needed to appear legitimate and trustworthy. Marriage to Charles Hartford provided her with credibility, social standing, and protection from scrutiny. William heard footsteps approaching the garage and quickly shoved the documents back into the glove compartment, closing it hastily. He stood up just as Elena appeared in the garage doorway. "Did you find the lights?" she asked, but her eyes were scanning the garage nervously. "They were off," William replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "The door was just slightly open, so I closed it properly." Elena's gaze lingered on her car for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'm always worried about the battery dying." As William walked back to his own car, he felt Elena's eyes following him. Did she suspect that he had seen the documents? Had he been too obvious in his nervousness? He started his BMW and backed out of the driveway, waving goodbye to his father and stepmother who stood together in the doorway of their home. They looked like the perfect couple, he thought bitterly. The distinguished judge and his elegant wife. As he drove away from the estate, William's mind was in turmoil. What was he supposed to do with this information? How could he tell his father that the woman he loved, the woman who had brought him happiness after years of loneliness, was a criminal using him as a cover for illegal activities? And, more immediately, what would Elena do if she suspected he had discovered her secret? William pulled over at a gas station 5 miles from the house and sat in his car, staring at his phone. He needed to call his private investigator immediately and have him dig deeper into Elena's background. But he also needed to warn his father, somehow, without destroying him in the process. As he sat there, trying to figure out his next move, William's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We know you saw the documents. Do not contact anyone. Do not tell your father. We will be in touch soon. Your family's safety depends on your cooperation." William's blood turned to ice. He looked around the gas station parking lot, suddenly paranoid that he was being watched. How had they gotten his number so quickly? Who were they? And, most terrifyingly, what did they want? He realized that Elena's secret was bigger and more dangerous than he had imagined. This wasn't just about financial fraud or identity theft. This was about something that required threats and surveillance and the kind of organization that could track his movements and contact him within minutes of his discovery. William started his car with shaking hands and drove toward home, his mind racing with questions and fears. Behind him, unbeknownst to him, a dark sedan pulled away from the gas station and began following at a discreet distance. The discovery in Elena's glove compartment had just changed everything. And William was beginning to understand that his father's life, and possibly his own, were now in serious danger. William Hartford barely slept that night. Every shadow outside his downtown apartment seemed threatening, every sound in the hallway made him jump. The text message from the unknown number glowed in his memory like a neon warning sign, and the documents he had seen in Elena's car replayed in his mind with crystal clarity. By morning, he had made a decision. Despite the threatening message, he couldn't leave his father in danger. But he also couldn't simply walk into Charles's house and announce that his beloved wife was a criminal. He needed more information, and he needed a plan. William's first call was to Detective Sarah Chen, a longtime family friend who had worked with his mother on several cases when Margaret Hartford was still practicing law. Sarah had been like an aunt to William growing up, and more importantly, she was someone he could trust absolutely. William? Sarah's voice was surprised but warm when she answered her phone. It's been too long. How are you holding up? Sarah, I need your help with something, William said without preamble. Something serious and potentially dangerous. The warmth in Sarah's voice immediately shifted to professional concern. What's going on? I can't talk about it over the phone. Can we meet somewhere private? Somewhere we won't be seen or overheard? Of course. There's a small diner on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the courthouse. The Bluebird Cafe. Can you be there in an hour? I'll be there. William spent the next hour carefully checking to see if he was being followed. He took a circuitous route to the cafe, stopping at random stores and doubling back on his path. If anyone was tailing him, they were better at surveillance than he was at detecting it. Sarah was already waiting in a corner booth when he arrived, her graying hair pulled back in its characteristic neat bun. At 55, she had the weathered look of someone who had spent decades dealing with the worst aspects of human nature, but her eyes still held warmth when she looked at William. You look terrible, she said bluntly as he slid into the booth across from her. When's the last time you slept? Yesterday feels like a lifetime ago, William replied. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. But I need you to listen to everything before you respond, okay? Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. I'm listening. William told her everything. The suspicious phone call from his investigator, the discovery in Elena's car, the threatening text message. As he spoke, Sarah's expression grew increasingly grave. Do you still have the text? She asked when he finished. William showed her his phone. Sarah studied the message carefully. This number is probably from a burner phone, she said. But we can try to trace it. What exactly did these documents say? William recounted everything he could remember about the passport, bank statements, and legal correspondence. Sarah took notes on a small pad, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. William, she said finally, if even half of what you're describing is accurate, your stepmother isn't just a fraud. She's likely connected to serious organized crime. Money laundering in those amounts, multiple identities, threats against family members, this is cartel-level stuff. The word cartel hit William like a physical blow. You think Elena is connected to drug cartels? I think Elena, or whoever she really is connected to something big enough and dangerous enough to require the kind of operational security you're describing. And that makes this incredibly dangerous for you and your father. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. We need to be very careful about how we proceed. If these people are monitoring your communications, if they're willing to threaten you this quickly, then they have significant resources and they're taking this very seriously. So what do we do? First, we need to verify what you saw. I have contacts who can run background checks that go deeper than standard private investigations. We need to know exactly who we're dealing with. Second, we need to make sure your father is safe without alerting Elena that we're investigating her. And third, we need to prepare for the possibility that this situation is going to get much worse before it gets better. William felt a chill run down his spine. Worse how? People who are involved in money laundering at this level don't just disappear quietly when they're discovered, William. They eliminate threats. After leaving the cafe, William spent the rest of the day trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while his world crumbled around him. He went to his office, attended meetings, returned phone calls, but his mind was elsewhere. Every time his phone rang, he expected another threatening message. Every knock on his office door made him tense with anticipation. By late afternoon, Sarah had called back with preliminary results from her investigation. William, you need to sit down for this, she said. The woman your father married doesn't exist. There is no Elena Vasquez with the background she's provided. The Elena Vasquez who supposedly grew up in Barcelona and attended university in the United States is a complete fabrication. William felt the room spinning around him. Then, who is she? Based on the passport information you described, her real name appears to be Maria Santos. And Maria Santos has connections that go all the way to the top of the Medellin cartel organization. The words hit William like a sledgehammer. The Medellin cartel was one of the most notorious and violent criminal organizations in the world. And this woman had been sleeping in his father's bed, eating at his father's table, managing his father's household for 3 years. Sarah, we have to get my father away from her immediately. William, listen to me very carefully. If we move too quickly or too obviously, we could get your father killed. These people don't hesitate to eliminate witnesses or loose ends. We need to be smart about this. Then, what do you suggest? I'm going to contact the FBI's Organized Crime Unit. They'll have resources and expertise that we need. In the meantime, you need to act normal. Visit your father as usual. Don't give Elena any reason to suspect that you know anything. You want me to just sit there and make small talk with a cartel operative? I want you to keep your father alive long enough for us to figure out how to extract him safely. That evening, William sat in his apartment staring at his phone, knowing he should call his father for their usual weekly check-in. The thought of having a casual conversation while knowing what he knew seemed impossible, but Sarah was right. Any deviation from his normal behavior could put his father in immediate danger. When Charles answered the phone, his voice was cheerful and relaxed. "Son, perfect timing. Elena and I were just discussing plans for the weekend. She's thinking about hosting a dinner party on Saturday night. Some of her friends from the international business community are in town." International business community. William wondered how many of Elena's business associates were actually criminals. "That sounds nice, Dad," William managed to say. "Anyone I know?" "I don't think so. They're mostly people Elena knew before we were married. She's been wanting to introduce me to more of her old friends." A terrible thought occurred to William. What if Saturday's dinner party wasn't social? What if Elena was planning to involve his father more directly in her criminal activities? A federal judge would be an invaluable asset to a money laundering operation. "Dad," William said carefully, "you know I've always been protective of you, especially after Mom died." "Of course. And I appreciate it, son. I just want you to know that if you ever felt uncomfortable about anything, or if you ever needed help with anything, you can always call me. Day or night." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "William, is everything all right? You sound worried about something." William closed his eyes, fighting the urge to tell his father everything right then and there. "I just love you, Dad. I want to make sure you're safe and happy." "I am happy," Charles said, his voice warm. "Happier than I've been since your mother died. Elena has brought so much joy into my life. I know it took you some time to warm up to her, but I hope you can see how much she means to me." "I can see that," William replied, his heart breaking. After ending the call, William sat in his darkened living room trying to figure out how to save his father from a woman who had spent 3 years expertly manipulating him. Elena had been patient, thorough, and brilliant in her deception. She had studied Charles's vulnerabilities, his needs, his desires, and she had crafted herself into exactly the woman he needed her to be. But why? What was the endgame? Was it simply about having a respected public figure as cover for her activities? Or was there something more specific she needed from Judge Charles Hartford? William's phone rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and his blood ran cold. This was it. The threat he'd been expecting all day. "Mr. Hartford," a man's voice said when William answered. The accent was slight but definitely Hispanic. "We need to meet." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The documents you found in your stepmother's car." "We know you have questions. We have answers. But this conversation needs to happen face to face." William's mouth was dry. "What do you want?" "Your cooperation. And your discretion. There are larger forces at work here than you understand. Meet us at the old warehouse district on Harbor Street. Pier 47. 1 hour. And if I don't come?" Then, your father will learn some very unpleasant truths about his wife's business associates. And, shortly after that, he will have an unfortunate accident." The line went dead. William stared at his phone, his hands shaking. This was it. The moment when he had to choose between his own safety and his father's life. But, really, there was no choice at all. He grabbed his jacket and keys, but, before leaving his apartment, he left a detailed message on Sarah Chen's voicemail explaining where he was going and why. If something happened to him, at least someone would know the truth about Elena and her associates. The drive to the warehouse district felt like driving to his own execution. The area was largely abandoned after dark, with empty buildings and broken streetlights creating plenty of shadows for dangerous meetings. Pier 47 was at the end of a long, deteriorating dock that jutted out into the dark water. William parked his car and walked slowly toward the water, every instinct screaming at him to turn around and run. Two figures emerged from the shadows near the end of the pier. One was a large man with a shaved head and expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the bulge of a shoulder holster. The other was smaller, more elegantly dressed, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Mr. Hartford," the smaller man said as William approached. "Thank you for coming. I am Carlos Montenegro. This is my associate, Mr. Ruiz." William's heart pounded, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "What do you want from me?" "Directly to business." "I appreciate that," Montenegro smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "You have discovered something about the woman your father married. Something that concerns you." "I don't know what you're talking about." Montenegro's smile widened. "Please, Mr. Hartford. We are all intelligent men here. You found Maria's documents. You know she is not who she claims to be. The question is, what are you going to do with this information?" William decided that honesty might be his only chance at survival. "I want to protect my father." "Excellent. That is exactly what we want as well." This response surprised William. "What do you mean?" "Maria Santos has been working for our organization for 5 years, Montenegro explained. Her marriage to your father was a business arrangement, designed to provide her with legitimate cover for certain financial activities. It has been a mutually beneficial arrangement for everyone involved. Except my father doesn't know about any of this." "Your father is safer not knowing," Montenegro said simply. "Judge Hartford's reputation and position provide Maria with the credibility she needs. In return, our organization ensures that he remains safe, protected, and well cared for." William felt sick. "You're using him." "We are protecting him," Montenegro corrected. "The world is a dangerous place, Mr. Hartford. Your father is a high-profile public figure. Without our protection, he would be vulnerable to any number of threats." "What kind of threats?" Montenegro gestured to the dark water surrounding them. "The kind that end badly for everyone involved." The message was clear. William's father was safe as long as he remained useful to Montenegro's organization. But, if William tried to interfere, if he tried to expose Elena's true identity or remove his father from the situation, then Charles Hartford would become a liability to be eliminated. "What do you want from me?" William asked again. "Your silence. Your cooperation. And, occasionally, your assistance with certain matters that require the touch of a respectable businessman. You want me to work for you. We want you to understand the reality of the situation," Montenegro said. "Your father has unknowingly become part of our organization's operations. You can either accept this and help us protect him, or you can fight it and watch him suffer the consequences." William felt trapped, surrounded by darkness and dangerous men with no good options available to him. But, as he stood there on that pier, looking at the cold faces of the men who controlled his father's fate, he realized something important. They needed him. Otherwise, why offer him a choice at all? Why not simply eliminate the threat he represented? There was something about this situation that required his willing cooperation rather than his forced silence. "I need time to think about this," William said finally. Montenegro nodded. Of course. But, not too much time. We will contact you tomorrow evening for your decision. And, Mr. Hartford? Yes? Your father is having dinner with Maria tonight. They're at Romano's, the Italian restaurant downtown. Table for two, very romantic. It would be unfortunate if their evening were interrupted by any unpleasant revelations. The threat was crystal clear. William nodded stiffly and walked back to his car, feeling the eyes of both men following him until he was out of sight. As he drove home, William's mind raced through his options. He could go to the FBI, but that would likely result in his father's death before any arrests could be made. He could try to warn his father directly, but Charles would never believe such an outlandish story without proof, and seeking proof would put both of them in immediate danger. Or he could agree to cooperate with Montenegro's organization, becoming a criminal himself in order to protect his father's life. William realized that Elena's secret had already destroyed his family, even though his father didn't know it yet. The question now was whether William could save his father's life, even if he couldn't save his father's happiness. As he pulled into his apartment building's parking garage, William noticed a familiar white Mercedes parked in the shadows near the exit. Elena was watching him, making sure he understood that his every move was being monitored. The web was closing around the Hartford family, and William was beginning to understand that there might be no way out that didn't end in tragedy. William Hartford didn't sleep at all that night. He paced his apartment until dawn, weighing impossible choices and contemplating the destruction of everything he held dear. By sunrise, he had made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was going to save his father, no matter the cost to himself. The first step was gathering more intelligence. If he was going to navigate this dangerous world of cartel politics and criminal enterprises, he needed to understand exactly what Elena's operation involved and who else might be connected to it. William called in sick to work and spent the morning conducting surveillance of his own. Using skills he'd learned from detective novels and crime documentaries, he positioned himself across the street from Elena and Charles's estate, watching for patterns of activity. What he saw over the next several hours alarmed him. A steady stream of visitors came and went from the house, all arriving in expensive cars and staying for brief meetings with Elena. None of them looked like the kind of people who would normally be visiting a federal judge's home. At 11:30 a.m., a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the driveway. Two men in suits emerged and were quickly ushered into the house by Elena. William recognized one of them as Ruiz, Montenegro's intimidating associate from the previous night's meeting. Through his binoculars, William could see into the living room where Elena was conducting what appeared to be a business meeting. She had documents spread across the coffee table and was pointing to various papers while speaking animatedly. This wasn't a social visit. This was a strategy session. Most disturbing of all, William could see his father moving around in the background, apparently unaware of what was happening in his own living room. Charles appeared to be in his study, visible through the open doorway, working on his own papers while criminals conducted business in the next room. William's phone rang, startling him from his observation. The caller ID showed Detective Sarah Chen. "William, where are you? I've been trying to reach your office all morning." "I'm watching Elena's house," William replied quietly. "Sarah, this is worse than we thought. She's conducting criminal business right in my father's home while he's there." "William, get away from there immediately. If they spot you conducting surveillance, they'll interpret it as a hostile act. I need to understand what's happening. My father is in the middle of a cartel operation and he doesn't even know it. Which is exactly why you need to be smart about this. I have news from my FBI contact. Maria Santos isn't just connected to the Medellin cartel. She's one of their top financial operatives. She specializes in using romantic relationships with high-profile targets to facilitate money laundering operations." William felt his stomach drop. How many other men has she done this to? At least 4 that we know of. A bank president in Miami, a state senator in California, a federal prosecutor in Texas, and a Supreme Court justice's clerk in Washington, D.C. What happened to them? Sarah's silence spoke volumes before she finally answered. 3 of them are dead, William. Apparent suicides or accidents that occurred after their usefulness to the organization ended. The 4th, the bank president, disappeared entirely. He's been missing for 2 years. William closed his eyes, seeing his father's future written in the fates of those other men. So Elena is planning to kill my father when she's done using him. It's a pattern. She establishes a relationship, uses the target's position and reputation to facilitate criminal activities, and then eliminates the liability when the operation moves to a new location or when the target becomes suspicious. How long do these relationships usually last? Based on the case histories, between 3 and 4 years. William's blood turned to ice. Elena and Charles had been married for 3 years. If the pattern held, his father's time was running out. Sarah, what would trigger the endgame? What would make them decide to eliminate my father? Discovery of the truth. An investigation. Any threat to the operation's security. Or simply the completion of whatever financial transactions they're using his reputation to facilitate. William realized that his discovery of the documents in Elena's car might have already triggered the endgame. Every moment his father remained in that house, every moment he remained unaware of his danger, brought him closer to becoming another accident in Maria Santos's wake of destruction. I have to warn him, William said. William, if you try to warn him directly, you'll be signing both of your death warrants. These people have already proven they can monitor your movements and communications. They'll know the moment you try to contact him. Then, what do you suggest? We're working with the FBI to plan a coordinated operation. But it's going to take time to put together a case that will stick and ensure the safety of all potential victims. Time we don't have. You said it yourself, the timeline suggests Elena's operation is approaching its conclusion. Which is why you need to be patient and let the professionals handle this. The professionals didn't prevent the deaths of 4 other men. William ended the call and continued watching the house. By 1 p.m., the stream of visitors had ended and the black SUV had departed. Elena emerged from the house and walked to her white Mercedes, apparently preparing to leave. This was William's opportunity. If he could get inside the house and speak to his father alone, maybe he could find a way to warn him without alerting Elena's surveillance network. William waited until Elena's car disappeared down the road, then drove quickly to the estate. He used his key to enter through the side door, the same entrance he had used countless times during his childhood and teenage years. Dad, he called out as he entered the house. William? Charles's voice came from his study. What a pleasant surprise. I thought you were working today. William found his father at his desk, reviewing what appeared to be legal briefs. Charles looked tired, William noticed, more tired than usual. There were dark circles under his eyes and his normally perfect posture seemed slightly slumped. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by, William lied. Where's Elena? She went to lunch with some friends. Business associates, actually. She's been so busy lately with her consulting work. Consulting work. William wondered what kind of consulting involved meetings with cartel operatives. Dad, can I ask you something personal? Charles looked up from his papers, his expression mildly curious. Of course. Do you ever feel like Elena keeps parts of her life separate from you? Like there are things about her work or her past that she doesn't share? Charles frowned slightly. That's an odd question, son. Why do you ask? William chose his words carefully. I've been thinking about relationships lately, about how well we can really know the people we love. Do you feel like you know everything important about Elena? I know everything I need to know, Charles replied, but there was a slight hesitation in his voice. She's a private person about some things, especially her work. But that's normal in her field. What exactly is her field? I mean, specifically. Charles set down his papers and looked at William with growing concern. William, what's this really about? You're asking very strange questions. Before William could respond, he heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Elena was back earlier than expected. Dad, William said urgently, I need you to promise me something. What? If you ever feel unsafe, if anything ever seems wrong or dangerous, call me immediately. Don't hesitate, don't try to handle it yourself. Just call me. William, you're scaring me. What's going on? The front door opened and Elena's voice called out cheerfully, Charles? I'm home early. Promise me, William whispered urgently. I promise, Charles said, but his eyes were full of concern and confusion. Elena appeared in the doorway of the study, her smile bright but her eyes sharp as they moved from Charles to William. William, what a lovely surprise, she said. I wasn't expecting to see you today. I was in the area, William replied, trying to match her casual tone. Just thought I'd stop by and say hello. How thoughtful, Elena said, but William could see her mind working, calculating why he was there and what he might have discussed with his father. Well, I should probably get going, William said. I have a meeting this afternoon. As William prepared to leave, Elena walked him to the door. Just before he reached his car, she spoke quietly behind him. William, darling, I hope you know that your father's happiness means everything to me. I would never want anything to jeopardize that happiness. The words were phrased as a loving sentiment, but William heard the threat beneath them. She was warning him that any action he took to disrupt her operation would result in his father's suffering. I'm sure you want what's best for him, William replied carefully. Always, Elena smiled. Family is the most important thing, don't you think? We must protect the people we love, no matter what sacrifices that requires. As William drove away from the estate, he realized that Elena was not just warning him to stay quiet. She was telling him that she knew he had discovered her secret, and she was giving him one last chance to cooperate before she took more drastic measures. That evening, William received another call from Montenegro. Mr. Hartford, I trust you have had time to consider our discussion. I have. And, your decision? William closed his eyes and spoke the words that would change his life forever. I'll cooperate. Excellent. There is a shipment arriving at the harbor tomorrow night. You will be present to provide legitimate business documentation for customs officials. Your consulting firm will officially be handling import logistics for a Colombian textile company. What's really in the shipment? That is not your concern. Your concern is ensuring that the paperwork appears legitimate and that any customs inspections proceed smoothly. And if I refuse? Then, your father will learn some disturbing truths about his wife's past, and his heart condition will tragically prove unable to handle the shock. William's blood ran cold. What heart condition? My father doesn't have a heart condition. Montenegro's chuckle was cold and humorless. Mr. Hartford, your father has been taking medication that Maria provides him daily. Vitamins, she tells him. They help maintain the heart condition that will become apparent whenever we decide it should. The full horror of the situation crashed over William. Elena wasn't just using his father as cover for criminal activities. She was slowly poisoning him, creating a medical condition that would provide a convenient cause of death when the time came to eliminate him. You're murdering him, William whispered. We are controlling the timeline, Montenegro corrected. As long as you cooperate, the medication will continue to be vitamins. But any attempt to interfere with our operations will result in a more immediate medical emergency. William realized he was trapped in a web of evil that extended far beyond simple money laundering. Elena and her associates were masters of manipulation, control, and murder. They had turned his father into an unwitting accomplice in criminal activities while slowly poisoning him and threatening William with his death. But, now that William knew the truth about the medication, he might be able to find a way to save his father's life. The question was whether he could do it without getting both of them killed in the process. The harbor, William said finally. Tomorrow night. What time? Midnight. Pier 23. And, Mr. Hartford? Yes? Welcome to the family business. As William hung up the phone, he realized that he had just agreed to become a criminal in order to save his father's life. But, he also realized that he now had inside access to Montenegro's operation, which might give him the opportunity to destroy it from within. The question was whether he could move fast enough to save his father before Elena decided that the Hartford family had outlived their usefulness to the cartel's operations. Tomorrow night at the harbor would be the beginning of William's life as a criminal. But it might also be the beginning of his plan to bring down the entire organization and save his father's life. Either way, there would be no going back to the peaceful existence he had known just 3 days ago. The discovery in Elena's glove compartment had changed everything, and now William had to navigate a world of violence and deception where one wrong move would mean death for everyone he loved. The next 24 hours passed like a slow-motion nightmare. William went through the motions of running his consulting business while secretly preparing for his evening rendezvous with Montenegro's criminal organization. He had to create legitimate-looking documentation for a fictional textile import operation, all while knowing that he was facilitating something far more sinister. Detective Sarah Chen had called 3 times, but William couldn't risk answering. Any communication with law enforcement could be monitored, and Montenegro had made it clear that his father's life hung in the balance. Instead, William focused on the one advantage he now possessed: inside knowledge of the cartel's operations. If he could gather enough evidence while participating in their activities, he might be able to provide the FBI with what they needed to arrest the entire organization simultaneously, before anyone could harm his father. The challenge was staying alive long enough to make that happen. At 6 p.m., William received an unexpected call from his father. "Son, I was wondering if you could come to dinner tonight. Elena is cooking that lamb dish you enjoy, and I thought we could catch up properly." William's heart raced. This had to be a setup. There was no way Elena would invite him to dinner on the same night he was supposed to be at the harbor unless she was planning something. "I'd love to, Dad, but I have a business meeting tonight." "Rain check?" "Of course. Actually, Elena suggested I invite you. She said she's been worried that you seem stressed lately." So Elena was monitoring his emotional state, looking for signs that he might be planning to betray the organization. William needed to play this carefully. "I have been under a lot of pressure at work," William admitted. "Maybe this weekend we could have a proper family dinner." "I'd like that. Son, Elena mentioned that you asked some unusual questions yesterday. About knowing people, about secrets. Is there something troubling you?" William closed his eyes. Elena was using his father to gather intelligence about his state of mind and his intentions. "Just business stress, Dad. You know how it is when you're trying to expand a company." "I do know. Your mother went through the same thing when she was building her practice. But remember, family is always more important than business. We're here for you if you need anything." The irony was painful. His father was offering support while unknowingly serving as a conduit for the very people who were destroying their family. "I know, Dad. I love you. I love you too, son." After ending the call, William sat in his car outside his office building, trying to calm his nerves before heading to the harbor. In a few hours, he would be committing federal crimes alongside the people who were slowly murdering his father. But he had to believe that this was the only way to ultimately save Charles Hartford's life. At 11:30 p.m., William drove to Pier 23. The harbor district was dark and largely deserted, with only the occasional security patrol and the distant lights of cargo ships creating any activity. William parked near the designated pier and walked toward the water, carrying a briefcase full of forged customs documentation. Montenegro was already waiting, along with Ruiz and 2 other men William didn't recognize. Behind them, a large cargo container sat on the dock, apparently recently unloaded from one of the ships anchored nearby. "Mr. Hartford," Montenegro greeted him. "Punctual. I appreciate that in a business partner. What do you need me to do?" "Simple. When the customs officials arrive, you present these documents." Montenegro handed him an additional folder. "You explain that your consulting firm has been hired to handle import logistics for Medellin Textiles. The container contains fabric samples and textile machinery." "What's really in there?" Montenegro smiled coldly. "Fabric samples and textile machinery. along with approximately 50 kilograms of cocaine hidden within the machinery components. William felt sick, but he forced himself to remain calm. And the customs officials will just accept the documentation? The customs officials have been paid to be cooperative. Your role is to provide legitimate business cover for their cooperation. A respected consultant with a clean record vouching for the shipment makes their approval appear routine rather than suspicious. At exactly midnight, 2 customs officials arrived in a government vehicle. William recognized the lead inspector as James Morrison, a career customs official with an excellent reputation. Seeing Morrison involved in this operation was almost as shocking as discovering Elena's true identity. "Mr. Morrison," William said as the inspector approached. "Mr. Hartford," Morrison replied, but his voice was strained and his expression deeply troubled. "I understand you're handling documentation for this shipment." As William presented the forged papers, he noticed that Morrison's hands were shaking slightly. This wasn't a corrupt official taking bribes. This was a man being coerced, just as William was being coerced. "Everything appears to be in order," Morrison said after a cursory review of the documents. "Standard textile import. No further inspection required." The entire process took less than 10 minutes. Morrison and his partner left quickly, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the situation as rapidly as possible. "Excellent work," Montenegro told William. "Your father should be proud of what a capable businessman you've become." "When will this end?" William asked. "When will my father be safe?" "Your father is safe as long as he remains useful," Montenegro replied. "Judge Hartford's reputation and position continue to provide valuable cover for our operations. As long as that continues, he will remain protected." "And if it stops being useful?" Montenegro's expression darkened. "Then, the medication Maria provides him will serve a different purpose." As William drove home from the harbor, he realized that he had just crossed a line from which there might be no return. He was now an active participant in drug trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering. Even if he eventually helped bring down Montenegro's organization, his own criminal involvement would likely result in prison time. But his father's life was worth any sacrifice, including William's own freedom and reputation. The next morning brought devastating news. Detective Sarah Chin called with an update that shattered what little hope William had been maintaining. "William, the FBI has been tracking Montenegro's organization for 2 years. They know about Elena, they know about the harbor operations, and they know about your father." "Then, why haven't they moved against them?" "Because Montenegro's organization is part of a larger investigation into cartel operations across the entire East Coast. The FBI wants to roll up the entire network simultaneously. But that investigation isn't ready to move for another 6 months." "Sarah, my father doesn't have 6 months. You said yourself that Elena's pattern suggests she's approaching the endgame of her operation. Which is why the FBI is prepared to offer you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Full immunity for your cooperation in gathering evidence against the organization. They want you to continue participating in cartel operations while wearing a wire and providing intelligence about planned activities." William felt a chill of terror. "You want me to become an undercover informant?" "It's the only way to gather the evidence needed to arrest everyone simultaneously and ensure your father's safety." "And if they discover I'm wearing a wire?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "They'll kill both my father and me," William said. "It's a risk. But it might be your father's only chance at survival." That afternoon, William made a decision that would either save his family or destroy them all. He agreed to work as an undercover informant for the FBI. The meeting with FBI agent Patricia Vance took place in a secure facility downtown. Agent Vance was a stern woman in her 40s with the focused intensity of someone who had spent years fighting organized crime. "Mr. Hartford, I want to be clear about what we're asking of you," Agent Vance said. "You'll be wearing recording equipment during all interactions with Montenegro's organization. You'll be gathering evidence about their financial operations, drug trafficking activities, and any planned crimes. And you'll be doing all of this while they believe you're a willing participant in their organization. How long will this go on? As long as it takes to gather sufficient evidence for prosecution. Realistically, several months. My father might not have several months. Which is why we'll be monitoring his situation closely. If there's any indication that his life is in immediate danger, we'll move to extract him regardless of the investigation timeline. Agent Vance showed William the recording equipment he would be wearing. A tiny microphone disguised as a shirt button, a recording device no larger than a smartphone that would be concealed in his jacket, and a panic button that would summon immediate FBI response. Remember, Agent Vance emphasized, your safety depends on acting completely natural. Montenegro's organization has survived this long by being paranoid and thorough. Any change in your behavior, any sign that you're uncomfortable or deceptive, and they'll become suspicious. And if they become suspicious? Then, you activate the panic button and hope we can reach you in time. That evening, William had dinner with his father and Elena, wearing a wire for the first time. The conversation was casual and domestic, covering topics like Charles's upcoming court cases and Elena's fictitious consulting projects. But William was hyper-aware of every word, knowing that FBI agents were recording everything Elena said. During dessert, Elena made a comment that chilled William's blood. "Charles, darling, Dr. Martinez called today about your test results. He wants to adjust your medication dosage." "Test results?" Charles looked confused. "I don't remember having any tests done recently." "The blood work from last month, remember? You were feeling tired, so I suggested you see Dr. Martinez for a checkup." William watched his father's face, seeing genuine confusion there. Charles had no memory of seeing a doctor or having blood work done. Which meant Elena was fabricating medical conditions and test results to justify changes in his medication. "Of course," Charles said finally. "I've been so busy with court cases that I'm forgetting things." "What did Dr. Martinez say?" "Just a slight adjustment to support your heart health. Nothing to worry about." Elena smiled warmly at Charles, the picture of a caring wife concerned about her husband's health. But William could see the calculation in her eyes. She was preparing to increase the dosage of whatever poison she had been giving his father. After dinner, Elena walked William to the door. "You seem more relaxed tonight," she observed. "I'm glad. Family stress can be so damaging to everyone involved." "I've been trying to focus on what's really important," William replied carefully. "Wise. Family loyalty is everything, don't you think? We must always put the needs of the family first, even when that requires difficult sacrifices." As William drove home, he realized that Elena was preparing to accelerate her timeline. The increased medication dosage suggested that she was moving toward the endgame of her operation. Whatever financial transactions she needed Charles's reputation to facilitate were nearing completion. William's phone rang as he pulled into his apartment building's parking garage. The caller ID showed Montenegro's number. "Mr. Hartford, we have another shipment arriving tomorrow night." "Same location, same procedure." "Tomorrow? That seems fast." "Business is accelerating. We have several time-sensitive transactions to complete over the next few weeks." "I'll be there." "Excellent. And, Mr. Hartford? Maria tells me that your father may need additional medical attention soon. Heart problems can be so unpredictable in men his age." The threat was crystal clear. Elena was planning to eliminate Charles Hartford within the next few weeks, probably as soon as her current round of financial transactions was complete. William realized that he was running out of time. The FBI investigation might take months to develop, but his father's life would be measured in days or weeks. As he sat in his car in the dark parking garage, William made a desperate decision. He was going to have to take action on his own, even if it meant betraying his agreement with the FBI and putting both himself and his father in immediate danger. Because sometimes, when the people you love are in mortal danger, you can't wait for the system to work. Sometimes, you have to take matters into your own hands and accept the consequences. Tomorrow night at the harbor would be another criminal transaction. But it would also be William's opportunity to gather the evidence he needed to force an immediate confrontation with Elena and her associates. The question was whether he could execute his plan before they realized what he was doing and eliminated both Hartford men permanently. William Hartford had never been so terrified in his life as he was walking toward Pier 23 for the second time. Hidden beneath his jacket was not only the FBI recording equipment but also a small video camera he had purchased that afternoon. If he was going to force a confrontation with Montenegro's organization, he needed irrefutable evidence of their criminal activities. The plan he had developed was desperate and dangerous, but it was the only way he could see to save his father's life before Elena's accelerated timeline reached its conclusion. Montenegro and his associates were waiting by another cargo container, this one larger than the previous night's shipment. The presence of additional men, all carrying visible weapons, suggested that this operation was more significant than simple drug trafficking. "Mr. Hartford," Montenegro greeted him. "Tonight's operation is more complex than yesterday's. We're expecting multiple customs officials, and there will be additional documentation required." "What's different about tonight?" "This shipment contains materials for a construction project. Concrete mixing equipment, steel components, industrial chemicals. The documentation must reflect a legitimate infrastructure development contract." William accepted the folder of forged documents, but, as he reviewed them, his blood ran cold. The paperwork described materials for constructing a concrete facility capable of handling large-scale chemical processing. This wasn't about importing cocaine. This was about establishing a drug manufacturing operation on American soil. "Where is this facility being built?" William asked. Montenegro smiled coldly. "On property recently purchased by a shell corporation controlled by Judge Hartford. The purchase was finalized last week using power of attorney documentation signed by your father." The full scope of Elena's operation finally became clear to William. She hadn't just been using his father's reputation as cover for financial transactions. She had been using his legal authority to purchase property and establish the infrastructure for a major drug manufacturing facility. And Charles had unknowingly signed the documents that would make him legally responsible for the entire operation. "My father doesn't know anything about purchasing property for drug manufacturing." "Your father signed papers that Maria told him were investment documents for a commercial real estate development. He trusts his wife completely, as any loving husband should." William realized that when the DEA eventually discovered the drug manufacturing facility, all the legal documentation would point directly to Judge Charles Hartford as the owner and operator. Elena had constructed the perfect frame job, ensuring that when her operation was eventually discovered, his father would take the blame while she disappeared with the profits. But she had made one critical mistake. She had revealed her endgame to William before implementing it. The customs officials arrived at midnight, but this time there were 4 of them instead of 2, and William could see that they were all deeply uncomfortable with their participation in the operation. These weren't corrupt officials taking bribes. These were men being coerced through threats against their families, just as William and his father were being coerced. As William presented the forged construction documents, he activated the hidden video camera and began recording everything. The evidence he was gathering would be enough to destroy Montenegro's organization, but only if he survived long enough to deliver it to the authorities. "Mr. Hartford," one of the customs officials said quietly as he reviewed the paperwork, "I recognize your name. Aren't you Judge Hartford's son?" "Yes," William replied, realizing that this man was trying to warn him about something. "Your father is a good man. I've appeared in his courtroom several times over the years. I hope he knows how dangerous the people he's associated with really are." "He doesn't know," William said simply. The customs official nodded grimly and completed his inspection without further comment. But, as he prepared to leave, he slipped a small piece of paper into William's hand. After the customs officials departed, William discreetly read the note, "Meet me at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I may be able to help." Montenegro appeared satisfied with the night's operation. "Excellent work again, Mr. Hartford. The facility construction can begin immediately. Your father should be proud of his contribution to economic development. When will this all be finished? William asked. Very soon. Maria estimates that the manufacturing facility will be operational within 2 weeks. After that, our organization will be relocating to a different region, and your father's services will no longer be required. The words were phrased euphemistically, but William understood their true meaning. In 2 weeks, Elena would eliminate his father and disappear, leaving Charles Hartford to posthumously take responsibility for a major drug manufacturing operation. What happens to my father after that? Montenegro's expression was cold and final. Judge Hartford has been under enormous stress lately. The burden of his judicial responsibilities, combined with his advancing age and developing heart condition, will unfortunately prove too much for him to bear. You're planning to make his death look like a heart attack. We're planning for his heart condition to reach its natural conclusion. As William drove home from the harbor, his hands were shaking so violently that he could barely steer the car. The video evidence he had gathered would be enough to convict Montenegro and his associates, but it would also implicate his father in drug trafficking and money laundering. Even if Charles survived Elena's plot, he would face federal prosecution and the destruction of his reputation. But reputation meant nothing if his father was dead. William had to find a way to save Charles's life first and worry about the legal consequences later. The next morning brought the call William had been dreading. His father's voice was weak and strained. Son, I'm not feeling well. Elena insisted I go to the hospital for some tests. What kind of symptoms are you having, Dad? Chest pain, difficulty breathing, fatigue. Dr. Martinez thinks it might be related to my heart condition. William's mind raced. Elena was accelerating the timeline even faster than he had expected. She was preparing to trigger the heart attack that would eliminate his father before the manufacturing facility was even completed. Dad, which hospital? St. Mary's. Elena is driving me there now. I'll meet you there. William called Detective Sarah Chen as he raced toward the hospital. Sarah, they're moving against my father today. Elena is taking him to St. Mary's Hospital, probably to administer whatever poison will cause his heart attack. William, the FBI isn't ready to move yet. We need more time to coordinate with local law enforcement. There is no more time. My father could be dead within hours. Then, you need to activate the panic button and let us extract you both immediately. That won't work. Elena and Montenegro will kill him the moment they realize law enforcement is involved. I need to handle this myself. William hung up and called the one person who might be able to help him. James Morrison, the customs official who had slipped him the note. Mr. Morrison? This is William Hartford. We need to meet immediately. My father's life is in danger. I'll be at Murphy's Diner in 20 minutes. William arrived at the diner to find Morrison already waiting in a corner booth. The customs official looked haggard and frightened, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Mr. Hartford, I've been forced to participate in Montenegro's operations for the past 6 months. They're holding my daughter hostage. Where is she? I don't know. But they've made it clear that any attempt to contact law enforcement will result in her death. William realized that Montenegro's organization was even more extensive than he had imagined. They weren't just threatening his father. They were controlling multiple government officials through kidnapping and extortion. Mr. Morrison, I have video evidence of Montenegro's drug trafficking operations. But I need help saving my father before I can turn it over to the authorities. What do you need from me? Access to the hospital. I think Elena is planning to poison my father today, but I need to get close to him without alerting her security. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with his decision. Finally, he nodded. There's a service entrance to St. Mary's that I use for customs inspections of medical equipment deliveries. I can get you inside without going through the main entrances where they might be watching. An hour later, William was walking through the service corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, wearing scrubs that Morrison had provided. The customs official had created a diversion by initiating a surprise inspection of medical equipment in the main lobby, drawing security attention away from the patient areas. William found his father's room on the cardiac unit. Charles was lying in a hospital bed, connected to various monitoring equipment, looking pale and weak. Elena sat beside the bed, holding a small vial of clear liquid and a syringe. Through the partially open door, William could see that Elena was preparing to inject his father with the contents of the vial. This was it. This was the moment when Elena would administer the poison that would cause Charles Hartford's heart attack. William burst into the room just as Elena was inserting the needle into his father's foreline. "Elena, stop!" She looked up, startled, and, for a moment her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "William, what are you doing here?" "The doctors said your father needs rest." "I know what's in that syringe," William said quietly. "And, I know who you really are, Maria Santos." Elena's hand froze on the syringe, and William could see her mind racing through her options. Behind her, Charles Hartford looked confused and frightened. "Son, what's going on?" "Elena is just giving me my medication." "Dad, that's not medication. It's poison." "Elena has been slowly poisoning you for months, and now she's planning to kill you." Charles's face went white with shock and disbelief. "That's impossible. Elena loves me. We're married." "She's a criminal, Dad. She married you to use your position and reputation to facilitate drug trafficking and money laundering. Everything about her identity is a lie." Elena slowly withdrew the syringe from the foreline, her expression shifting from surprise to cold fury. "William, you have no idea what you're interfering with. There are forces involved in this situation that are much larger and more dangerous than you understand. I understand that you've been using my father to establish a drug manufacturing operation while slowly poisoning him. I understand that you're planning to frame him for your crimes and then eliminate him." Elena stood up from her chair, and William could see that she was carrying a concealed weapon beneath her jacket. "Your father has been useful to our organization. But his usefulness has reached its conclusion. And, unfortunately, your interference means that you've also become a liability." Charles Hartford struggled to sit up in his hospital bed, his eyes moving between his son and his wife with growing horror. "Elena, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me William is wrong about everything." Elena's expression softened slightly as she looked at Charles, and, for a moment William thought he saw genuine emotion in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Charles. I did care for you, in my own way. You're a good man. But this was always a business arrangement. The 3 years we spent together, our marriage, the plans we made for the future, was any of it real?" "The plans for the future were real," Elena said sadly. "You just weren't part of them." Elena reached for her weapon, but William was faster. He tackled her before she could draw the gun, and they crashed into the medical equipment beside his father's bed. The vial of poison flew across the room and shattered against the wall. As they struggled, William managed to activate the panic button that the FBI had given him. Within minutes, the hospital room was filled with federal agents and local police officers. Elena was arrested, along with 3 associates who had been waiting in the hospital lobby. Montenegro and his organization were rounded up in coordinated raids across the city, all based on the video evidence William had gathered at the harbor operations. But, for William, the most important moment came when his father reached out and grasped his hand. "Thank you, son. You saved my life. I almost lost you, Dad. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. You did what you had to do. Your mother would be proud of how you protected our family." 6 months later, William Hartford sat in a federal courthouse watching Elena Vesquez, whose real name was indeed Maria Santos, being sentenced to life in prison without parole for racketeering, drug trafficking, murder conspiracy, and multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. His father had made a complete recovery after the poisons were purged from his system, and the charges against him had been dropped in recognition of his status as a victim rather than a willing participant in the criminal enterprise. James Morrison had been reunited with his daughter after the FBI raid uncovered Montenegro's kidnapping operation, and he had received immunity for his testimony against the organization. As for William, he had received immunity for his cooperation with the investigation, but the experience had changed him forever. He had learned that the people closest to us can harbor the darkest secrets, and that sometimes protecting the ones we love requires sacrifices that test the very limits of our courage and morality. The discovery in Elena's glove compartment had indeed changed everything for the Hartford family. But, in the end, it had also saved them, proving that sometimes the truth, no matter how dangerous, is the only path to survival and redemption. Judge Charles Hartford returned to the bench with a renewed appreciation for justice and family loyalty. William Hartford returned to his consulting business with a deeper understanding of the complexities of human nature and the importance of protecting the innocent from those who would exploit their trust. And Elena Vasquez, also known as Maria Santos, began serving a sentence that would ensure she never again had the opportunity to destroy another family through deception and manipulation. The glove compartment that had started it all was eventually destroyed as evidence, but its contents had revealed a truth that, while painful, had ultimately set the Hartford family free from a web of lies that could have destroyed them all.